One of the most common accusations brought against Christians is don't judge me or you're too judgy. And so today we're going to be in Jesus's teaching on judge not lest you be judged. And so this should be an exciting teaching for people who are both Christians or not Christians because it's a topic that everybody wonders about. You know, we find passages in the Bible that call us to use sober judgment, and then we have Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount telling us don't judge. So, what did he mean there in Matthew chapter 7? Let's go ahead and dive into the passage, and it says, "Judge not, that you be not judged, for with the judgment that you pronounce, you will be judged, and with the same measure you use, it will be measured to you." So we find here in verses 1 and 2 of Matthew chapter 7 the main principle, and Jesus does this through the Sermon on the Mount. He'll state a principle or he'll reference a command, and then he will elaborate to unpack what he means. So the main principle here is judge not, or you're going to be judged, and whatever measure you use in judgment is going to come back to you. What does Jesus mean by judge? Well, the basic definition of judge, at least in the context that we're talking about, is to look upon another person's actions and hold them in contempt for not doing it the way that you think they should. That's the kind of judgment that Jesus is talking about. So, judgment is not just being able to recognize that something that someone's doing is wrong. We're supposed to recognize if something is wrong or right. That way we can live moral and upright lives. But judgment is where you hold someone in contempt for what they've done because they didn't do it the way you thought they should. And that's what Jesus is dealing with here. And he begins to kind of elaborate on the principle of judge not lest you be judged in the next few verses. So we're going to read that real quickly. It says here in verse 3, why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but you do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when there is a log in your eye? You hypocrite! First take the log out of your eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. So here we find a couple of things that Jesus points out. Number one is that most people who are quick to judge do so to ignore the sin that's in their own life. There's a common habit in people who are insecure about themselves and they don't want to admit that they have issues, is to just focus on everybody else's issue. And he says, why do you try to take the speck out of your brother's eye when you don't even have one? When you don't even have the log taken out of your eye. So, in order to ascertain sober judgment, which is what Jesus is calling the reader to, not to use judgment that is corrupt and judgment that is blind because the individual has their own sin that they haven't dealt with. But in order to ascertain proper judgment, we must do so in light of our own propensity to sin and work at repenting of our sin before we try to help someone else. And that's why it's so important when you see somebody who is maybe walking in a wrong way or taking a wrong path, we have to ask ourselves, am I qualified to help that individual? Or am I just judging them and holding them in contempt because I'm insecure about myself and I just want to fault find? But Jesus says if you want to help somebody who you see off track, make sure that you've repented of that in your own life. So it's very interesting there. He finishes up this passage in verse 6 and he says, do not give dogs what is holy, and do not throw your pearls before the pigs, lest they trample them underfoot and turn to attack you. So Jesus wraps this whole teaching up saying, listen, let's say you have removed the log from your own eye. Let's say you've repented of your own sin and you've noticed that you have a friend or someone in your life that is walking a wrong path. He's saying, don't try to help them. Don't cast your pearls before a pig, or don't try to give to the dogs that which is holy. Don't take the things that God has taught you and try to help somebody else with it if they're not willing to receive. So essentially, what we find in this passage is number one, Jesus saying, listen, don't hold people into contempt. Don't look down on people because they're struggling, because you're forgetting that you once struggled as well. You were the one with the log in your eye, and you're judging your brother because he is stuck in a sin. Then, number two, if we haven't repented of our own sin, we're unable to help them. So the only time we should use any form of judgment, which the Bible calls sober judgment, is to discern that someone is off track in order to offer them help. But in order to offer them help and to be qualified to do so, we need to have a repentant heart ourselves. And then finally, the person needs to want to be free. This is why he says, don't throw what's holy before the dogs or cast your pearls before swine. You need to take time and intercede on behalf of that person that you see struggling and ask God to bring them to a place where they're ready to move forward. And also make sure that you yourself have repented before you try to dive in to their situation and help them out, and make sure you have accountability into your life so that you don't also find yourself tempted. So that's what Jesus teaches about, the whole, you hear the catchphrase, only God can judge me. Here's the thing. God calls us to use sober judgment. He doesn't want us to judge out of a wrong perspective where we have sin in our own life, and He doesn't want us trying to use our discernment of someone who's suffering and trying to help them when they're not ready to be helped. So I hope that was a blessing for you today. These devotionals are part of our ministry fighting the epidemic of addiction called Freedom Journey Ministries, and we are just calling you to join us in the fight by simply praying for those who are suffering from addiction that our ministry is seeking to help. We try to disciple those within our ministry with these videos, but we also want to be a blessing to you. So I hope you'll take some time and pray for us. I look forward to continuing through Jesus' Sermon on the Mount with you in our next devotional. God bless.